Have you ever found yourself in a tricky driving situation and wondered, what does the law actually say about this?
Yeah, or maybe just curious about the real rules beyond what you crammed for your driver's test.
Exactly. Well, today you're getting a shortcut to truly understanding the legal blueprint for how we operate vehicles right here in Texas.
That's right. We're cracking open Chapter 545 of the Texas Transportation Code. It's surprisingly comprehensive.
It really is. It covers everything from the absolute basics, like driving on the right side, all the way to passing, turning, stopping.
And even the really new stuff, like rules for automated vehicles. It's basically the foundation that affects every single driver in the state.
And our insights today, they come directly from the official Texas statutes themselves. This isn't about, what you think the rules are.
Or what everyone else seems to be doing on the road.
Right. It's about what the law explicitly states, often in, well, surprising detail.
So our mission for this deep dive is to equip you, the listener, with a deeper, more practical understanding of these regulations.
Think of it as your guide to becoming a more informed, more confident, and ultimately a safer driver. Ready to navigate those weird situations and understand the why behind the rules you see every day.
And we'll uncover some fascinating details, things that might genuinely change how you view your daily commute.
You'll find that many of these details might just surprise you, even if you've been driving in Texas for years.
Definitely. We'll start by laying some essential groundwork. Some definitions that aren't just legal jargon. They actually shape how the law applies out there on the road.
Okay, let's begin by clearing up some terms. The code defines things in ways you might not expect, like on-track equipment.
Yeah, when you hear that, you probably picture a huge freight train, right?
Totally. Or maybe a passenger train.
But the law's definition is much broader. It covers any car, rolling stock, equipment, or other device that, alone or coupled to another device, is operated on a railroad track.
So not just trains.
Exactly. The real nugget here. It means your vigilance at a railroad crossing needs to extend beyond just looking for a full train.
Ah, so that single maintenance car moving slowly.
Or even just some equipment being moved along the track. Legally, that's on-track equipment. It demands the same stop-and-look caution.
That broad definition really expands your awareness at crossings.
It's designed to protect you from unexpected rail activity you might otherwise just dismiss.
That's a crucial distinction. Okay, now, let's talk about a maneuver we all do. Passing. The law has a very specific two-part definition here.
It does. Pass, or passing, means both to overtake and proceed past another vehicle moving in the same direction and return to the original lane of travel, or even just attempting this whole maneuver.
So the pass isn't finished just when you get ahead of the other car.
Nope. This definition highlights that a pass isn't legally complete until you're safely back in your original lane. It emphasizes the full, safe execution of the whole thing.
Which explains why cutting someone off by pulling back in too soon isn't just rude.
It's legally problematic. The pass isn't finished until you're safely clear, back in your lane, maintaining proper distance.
Okay, got it. Another really important definition, especially for parents or anyone driving near schools, is school bus.
Right. The code explicitly states this term includes a multifunction school activity bus.
So those white or green buses, maybe taking the band to a game or kids on a field trip?
Uh-huh. They are legally considered school buses for all intents and purposes.
Meaning the really strict rules about stopping for them apply just the same, even if it's not yellow.
That's precisely the implication.
Right.
When those visual signals, the flashing lights or stop arm, are activated, you have to stop. Same rules apply, regardless of the bus's color or specific function.
That's a critical safety point. I bet a lot of people overlook that.
It's often overlooked, yeah.
Yeah.
But the law makes no distinction. It's all about protecting children.
Makes sense. Now let's unpack the concept of an operator. The code says a reference to an operator includes a reference to the vehicle operated by the operator if the reference imposes a duty or provides a limitation on the movement or other operation of that vehicle. That sounds a bit dense. Why does this specific phrasing matter to you as a driver?
What's fascinating here is this isn't just semantic legal stuff. It means the law considers the vehicle an extension of your actions, the driver's actions.
So if a rule says the vehicle shall do something,
It means you, the operator, are responsible for making sure that vehicle does it. It reinforces that you are always accountable for your vehicle's movements and its compliance with the law.
your control, your responsibility leaves no room for doubt.
Exactly. No ambiguity about who's in charge.
All right, let's dive into the practicalities of driving, starting with what seems like the absolute most basic rule. driving on the right side of the roadway. Seems like a no-brainer, right?
You'd think so.
But the law actually provides some important exceptions, things we probably do every day without thinking about the legality.
That's very true. The fundamental rule says on roadways of sufficient width, you shall drive on the right half of the roadway. Simple enough.
But then come the exceptions.
Right away. The most common and necessary one is, of course, when you're passing another vehicle, you generally have to move left to do that.
Makes sense. What other situations might legally put you on the left side?
Well, another key exception is when there's an obstruction blocking your lane. Think a fallen tree branch, maybe some unexpected construction debris, or a stalled car.
Okay, so you can go around it.
You can move left to go around it, yes, but there's a critical caveat. You must yield the right-of-way to any vehicle moving correctly on the unobstructed portion that poses an immediate hazard.
Meaning if an oncoming car is close and moving properly in their lane?
They have priority. You have to wait until it's clearly safe for you to maneuver around that obstruction without interfering with them.
That's just common sense safety. Yield to the clear lane.
Yeah.
What about roads with multiple lanes or one-way streets? How does the right half rule apply there?
Good question. If the road has 3 marked lanes, specifically for traffic, maybe a center turn lane or one of those reversible lanes, you might not be strictly on the right half, and that's perfectly permitted by law.
And one-way streets.
On one-way streets, the entire roadway is for traffic moving in one direction, so the right half concept doesn't apply in the same way. You can generally use any available lane, following other lane rules, of course.
Okay. Now, what about those slower drivers? The ones who seem to just cruise along in the left lane, holding people up? The law definitely has something to say about them.
Oh, it certainly does. If you're moving slower than the normal speed of traffic, you shall drive in a right-hand lane available, or as close as practicable to the right-hand curb or edge.
Unless you're passing or turning left.
Exactly. Those are the only 2 exceptions. Otherwise, the rule is clear. Slower traffic keeps right. This is crucial for efficient traffic flow and, honestly, for preventing road rage.
So if you're just cruising, stay right. It's a legal requirement, not just a courtesy. It really does help keep things moving. Now, what about bigger roads? Roadways with 4 or more lanes for two-way traffic.
On those, the general rule is you may not drive left of the center line.
But there are exceptions there, too.
Always exceptions. You can drive left of center if an official traffic control device authorizes it, like a sign, directing you into a specific lane for a turn. Also, the obstruction rule applies, provided you yield to oncoming traffic. And of course, you can cross the center line to make a left turn into or out of an alley, private road, or driveway.
So these rules are all geared towards predictable, safe movement, especially on those bigger, faster roads.
Precisely. It's about managing interactions and reducing conflict points.
Okay, let's transition from general lane use to the specific rules around passing. We've got rules for passing left, being passed, passing right, even designated zones. Let's start with the most common, passing to the left.
For passing on the left, the basic rule is you pass to the left of the other vehicle at a safe distance. And this is important. You may not move back to the right side until safely clear of the passed vehicle.
So maintain that safe distance even after you're ahead.
Yes. And the safety requirements before you even start are critical. You can't drive left of center to pass unless the left side is clearly visible and free of approaching traffic for a distance sufficient to permit passing without interfering with anyone oncoming or the car you're passing.
So clear view, no interference. Seems logical. Now, what about that really specific 200 feet rule I've heard about? It sounds very precise for a traffic law.
It is very specific, and it's a critical safety measure. If you use a lane meant for oncoming traffic to pass someone, you shall return to an authorized lane of travel before coming within 200 feet of an approaching vehicle.
200 feet? That's a decent buffer.
It is. It's a concrete measure designed to ensure you don't create a head-on collision risk. It forces you to complete your pass well before any potential conflict. If there's no oncoming traffic flows, you just return as soon as practicable.
Okay. Now, flipping the script. When you're the one being passed, the law has rules for your behavior, too.
Yes, cooperation is key. If you are being passed, you shall, on audible signal, move or remain to the right in favor of the passing vehicle. And here's the one people often forget or ignore: you may not accelerate until completely passed.
You know, that no accelerating rule is probably one of the most commonly ignored, but it's clearly stated. What's the real impact of someone speeding up while being passed? Legally and just practically?
It's huge. Think about it on a 2-lane road. Someone pulls out to pass you. If you speed up, you're not just being a nuisance. You're breaking the law and actively creating a dangerous situation.
You're trapping them in the oncoming lane longer.
Exactly. You prolong the pass, potentially putting both vehicles and any oncoming traffic in serious danger. The law mandates cooperation from the vehicle being passed. It's vital for everyone's safety.
Makes sense. Now, what about those no passing zones we see marked, usually with solid yellow lines?
Simple. You must obey no passing zone, signs, or markings. Generally, you may not drive on the left side of the roadway in a no passing zone or on the left side of any pavement striping designed to mark a no passing zone.
Were there any exceptions there?
Just one, really. You can cross pavement striping or the center line in a sign-only no passing zone, meaning there's a sign but maybe not a solid line, only to make a left turn into or out of an alley, private road, or driveway.
Ah, okay. So turning left is still possible, but no passing. Who decides where these zones are?
The state, Texas Transportation Commission,
Yeah.
and local authorities determine and mark these zones. They're placed specifically where passing would be extra hazardous, like on curves, hills, near intersections where sightlines are limited.
So even if you can't pass, you can still turn left from a no passing zone if it's properly signed. Good to know. What are some other limitations on driving left when you're not even trying to pass?
Right, even if you're not passing, you may not drive to the left side of the roadway if you're approaching within 100 feet of an intersection or a railroad grade crossing. That applies inside a city or if it's marked outside a city.
100 feet, that's not very far.
No, it's close. The same 100-foot rule applies when you're approaching a bridge, viaduct, or tunnel. Also, you can't drive left when you're waiting to get onto a ferry operated by TXDOT if there are signs posted.
And the exceptions.
The usual. It doesn't apply on one-way roadways or when you're specifically making a left turn into or from an alley or private road or driveway. These restrictions are all about managing high-risk areas, intersections, crossings, bridges, where visibility or conflicting traffic movements demand extra caution, and keeping people in predictable lanes.
It's clear the law is really focused on preventing head-on collisions and giving drivers predictability in potentially dangerous spots.
What about passing to the right? Is that ever allowed? Most of us are taught, pass left only.
It is permitted, but only under very specific and safe conditions. You can pass to the right only if conditions permit safely passing to the right, and one of these situations applies. First, the vehicle being passed is making or about to make a left turn.
Okay, so they're turning left. You can carefully go around on their right.
Correct. Second, you are on a highway with unobstructed pavement, not occupied by parked vehicles, and sufficient width for 2 or more lines of moving vehicles in each direction.
Like a multi-lane highway where there's space.
Yes. Or third, you're on a one-way street or roadway with similar conditions, unobstructed pavement wide enough for 2 or more lines of traffic.
So it's definitely not a free-for-all on the right side. You can't just say dart under the shoulder to pass someone. Absolutely not. There's a crucial prohibition right there in the law. You may not pass to the right by leaving the main traveled portion of a roadway unless it's specifically allowed by the separate rule about driving on an improved shoulder.
That's a very important distinction. So let's talk about that. Driving on an improved shoulder. That seems like one of those things many drivers think is just universally illegal.
Right. People often think you can never drive on the shore.
But the law gives it highly specific, limited, but important uses, doesn't it?
Yes, the law is quite precise. Think of shoulders primarily as emergency areas or for very specific brief maneuvers, not for general travel. The law spells out exactly when you can use them.
So what are those times for the right shoulder?
On the right shoulder, if it's safe and necessary, you can drive on it. To stop, stand, or park. Okay, that's obvious. But also to accelerate before entering the main traffic lane, like when you're coming off an on-ramp.
Okay, that makes sense. Merging in.
To decelerate before making a right turn. To pass another vehicle that is slowing or stopped on the main highway, disabled, or preparing to make a left turn.
Ah, so if someone's stopped or turning left, you can use the right shoulder to get around them carefully.
Yes. Also, critically, to allow another vehicle traveling faster than you to pass.
So you can pull onto the shoulder to let someone by.
If it's safe, yes. Also, as permitted or required by an official traffic control device, or simply to avoid a collision.
Wow, that's actually a lot more permitted uses than I think most people realize. What about the left shoulder? That seems less common.
It is, and the uses are much more restricted. On the left shoulder, typically found only on divided or limited access highways, you can only drive on it if it's safe, and only to slow or stop when your vehicle is disabled, and traffic or other circumstances prohibit you from moving safely to the right shoulder.
So only if you're broken down and truly stuck on the left.
Pretty much. Or again, as permitted or required by an official traffic control device, or to avoid a collision.
So these are very specific scenarios, definitely not for routine driving to bypass traffic. Are any vehicles exempt from these shoulder rules?
Yes, these limitations on driving on an improved shoulder do not apply to authorized emergency vehicles responding to a call, police patrols performing duties, bicycles, or designated slow-moving vehicles.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture.
The rules for shoulder use are very tight because shoulders generally aren't built for regular traffic loads or speeds. They're emergency or specific use lanes. Understanding these specific allowances can be a lifesaver, literally, by providing a safe place to stop or a way around a hazard. But deviating outside these permitted uses, just driving on the shoulder because traffic is slow, that's a clear violation and can be extremely dangerous. Hashtag tag 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 3. Multi-lane driving, following, and restricted highways.
All right, let's move into multi-lane driving and how we interact with other vehicles, starting with basic lane discipline. We all know we should stay in our lane, but what does the law actually require?
Well, the code says an operator on a roadway divided into two or more clearly marked lanes shall drive as nearly as practical entirely within a single lane.
As nearly as practical. So perfection isn't required, but drifting is bad.
Exactly. And you may not move from the lane unless that movement can be made safely. That's the core principle. Stay in your lane and don't leave it unless it's safe. It's fundamental for preventing side swipes and just maintaining predictable traffic flow. Be predictable for other drivers.
That sounds like basic common sense, but I think we all see people drifting or changing lanes without even looking. What if a roadway has 3 lanes and it's for two-way traffic, like maybe a center turn lane?
In that scenario, an operator may not drive in the center lane except under specific conditions. When you're passing another vehicle and the center lane is clear of traffic for a safe distance, when you're preparing to make a left turn, or where the center lane is specifically designated by signs or markings for traffic moving in your direction.
So that center lane isn't just an extra travel lane.
Generally not, unless marked otherwise. And remember, traffic control devices can also direct slow-moving traffic to a certain lane, or even prohibit lane changes in certain areas, like near intersections or construction zones. So always keep an eye out for signs and pavement markings.
Okay, now this section about motorcycles is fascinating, especially the parts about lane splitting. That's a common practice in some other states, but definitely not here in Texas. What does the law actually mean for daily drivers interacting with motorcyclists and for the motorcyclists themselves?
This is a really important distinction because you're right, many states do have different rules. It's critical for drivers and especially motorcyclists to know Texas's specific stance. The law is very explicit. The operator of a motorcycle is entitled to full use of a lane.
Full use, not part of a lane.
Exactly. And it goes on. A motor vehicle may not be driven in a manner that deprives a motorcycle of the full use of a lane. This directly combats that common and dangerous idea that motorcycles should squeeze over or share part of a lane with a car. They have the same right to the entire lane as any other vehicle.
That's a crucial clarification for car drivers. What about motorcycles riding side by side or that lane splitting issue?
Motorcycles may operate two abreast in a single lane with another motorcycle. So 2 bikes side by side in one lane. Perfectly legal.
Okay.
However, the law strictly prohibits motorcycles from operating more than 2 abreast in a single lane. And here's the big one. They may not operate between lanes of traffic moving in the same direction.
So absolutely no lane splitting or lane filtering in Texas traffic.
None. It's explicitly forbidden. They also cannot pass another motor vehicle while they're in the same lane as the vehicle being passed if to change lanes to pass, just like a car.
Any exceptions?
The only exception to these prohibitions is for police officers performing official duties.
So the intent here is clearly about safety and predictability, even if it means motorcycles can't move through stop traffic like they can in some other places.
Precisely. It's about ensuring predictable movements for everyone on the road. Knowing that lane splitting is prohibited in Texas can prevent dangerous assumptions by both car drivers and motorcyclists.
Now let's talk about multi-lane roadways with one-way movement. There's a unique yielding rule here that often trips people up. Seems kind of counterintuitive.
It really does. On a roadway divided into 3 or more lanes, providing for one-way traffic, the law says, an operator entering a lane of traffic from a lane to the right shall yield the right-of-way to a vehicle entering the same lane of traffic from a lane to the left.
Okay, let me process that. If I'm in the rightmost lane of, say, a three-lane one-way road, and I want to move one lane left,
Mm-hmm.
and someone from the far left lane also wants to move into that same middle lane, they have the right of way over me.
Yes, that's correct, according to the statute. It prioritizes the vehicle merging from the faster or inside lane in that specific scenario on a multi-lane one-way system.
That is definitely counterintuitive for many drivers, I think.
It is. It's designed for complex traffic flows you might see on, say, downtown one-way grids or intricate highway interchanges, emphasizing a predictable flow from left to right in these specific merging scenarios. It aims to prevent collisions where multiple vehicles are vying for the same spot from different angles.
All right, let's shift gears to following distance, something every driver thinks about, but maybe not always correctly. The law lays out what's called the assured clear distance rule.
Right. The general rule is that you shall maintain an assured clear distance between the two vehicles so that, considering the speed of the vehicles,
Right.
traffic, and the conditions of the highway, the operator can safely stop without colliding with the preceding vehicle or veering into another vehicle, object, or person.
So it's not a fixed number of car lengths or seconds.
No, it's dynamic. The key insight here is that rule you might have learned, maybe the 2-second rule or 3-second rule, that's really a minimum starting point under good conditions. The law demands you maintain enough space to stop safely regardless of your speed or the current conditions, rain, fog, heavy traffic, whatever.
So if you rear-end someone,
Legally, it's almost always presumed to be your fault because the law essentially says you didn't maintain enough assured clear distance to stop safely. It puts the responsibility squarely on the trailing driver to always have enough space to react.
that's a powerful legal point. Constantly adjust your following distance based on conditions. What about for larger vehicles like trucks or vehicles pulling trailers?
Outside of business or residential districts, if you're following another large vehicle like a truck or bus, you shall, if conditions permit, leave sufficient space between the vehicles so that a vehicle passing the operator can safely enter and occupy the space.
Ah, leave room for cars to merge back in after passing you.
Exactly. This doesn't prohibit a truck from passing another vehicle. It just means they need to consider leaving adequate space for others, especially on two-lane roads where passing opportunities are limited.
Does the same apply to caravans?
Yes, pretty much. The same principle applies to caravans or motorcades outside business residential districts. You shall allow sufficient space so that another vehicle can safely enter and occupy the space. The specific exception is for a funeral procession. It's just smart planning for road safety and traffic flow, allowing safe merging and passing.
And I noticed the law even accounts for modern technology now, mentioning connected braking systems.
Yes, that's an interesting update. The law acknowledges that an operator can be assisted by the system to maintain assured clear distance or sufficient space. It defines a connected braking system as involving electronic coordination of braking between vehicles.
So like adaptive cruise control or maybe truck platooning systems.
Exactly. This shows how the law is trying to adapt to new vehicle technology, providing legal backing for their function and maintaining safe following distances, which is quite forward-thinking.
Moving on to divided and restricted highways, like our major interstates or freeways. The basic rule for divided highways seems straightforward.
It is. On a highway, with two or more separate roadways, divided by a space, physical barrier, or section, you shall drive on the right roadway, unless directed otherwise by signs or markings. And obviously, you may not drive over, across, or in a dividing space, physical barrier, or section, except through authorized openings or crossovers. Don't cut across the median.
Pretty clear. What about restricted access roads, like freeways where you can only get on or off at ramps?
Also straightforward. You may not drive on or from a limited access or controlled access roadway, except at an entrance or exit that is established by a public authority. You have to use the designated ramps. These roads are designed for high-speed, free-flowing traffic, and just pulling off or onto the main lanes anywhere else would be incredibly dangerous.
And authorities can actually prohibit certain users from these highways, right? That's why I never see pedestrians or bicycles on an interstate.
Exactly. The law allows the Texas Transportation Commission, or a local authority, like a city or county, to prohibit certain users from limited access highways. This list includes parades, funeral processions, pedestrians, bicycles, electric bicycles, small motorcycles, specifically 250cc engine displacement or less, or any non-motorized traffic. They have to post signs to inform the public.
So it's a deliberate exclusion for safety on high-speed roads.
Yes, putting slow-moving or vulnerable users on those roads would pose a significant danger.
That makes a lot of sense. What about lane restrictions for specific types of vehicles, like trucks on multi-lane highways? I often see signs saying trucks use right two lanes or something similar.
The law specifically addresses this. The Texas Transportation Commission for state highways or municipalities' counties for highways under their control can restrict through traffic of a certain class of vehicle, typically large trucks, to 2 or more designated lanes on highways that have at least 3 travel lanes going in each direction.
So they can essentially create dedicated truck lanes for through traffic.
Yes, but there's a crucial exception built in for flexibility. Any such restriction order or ordinance must allow the restricted vehicle, like a truck, to use any lane of the highway, to pass another vehicle, and to enter and exit the highway.
So they can't be totally boxed into the right lanes. They can still move left to pass or to get to a left side exit.
Correct. It prevents total exclusion and ensures they can perform necessary maneuvers. Also, municipalities and counties need TXDOT approval for these restrictions based on traffic studies to ensure consistency across different areas. TXDOT can also suspend or rescind that approval if conditions change or the restriction isn't working safely.
That sounds like a good balance, and I've definitely seen temporary lane restrictions specifically in construction zones, often targeting trucks. Does the law cover that too?
It does. The law allows the TXDOT executive director to restrict commercial motor vehicles to specific lanes within designated construction or maintenance work zones if a traffic study shows it's necessary for safety. These are temporary restrictions that expire when the work zone is removed. They provide a legal basis for those common lane closures you see on big highway projects, prioritizing safety for workers and drivers in those active, often congested areas.
Okay, let's transition to a very common, everyday part of driving: turning and signaling. Clearly showing other drivers what you intend to do is absolutely crucial for safety. What does the law say about how you're supposed to turn at intersections? Let's start with right turns.
For a right turn at an intersection, the rule is you shall make both the approach and the turn as closely as practicable to the right-hand curb or edge of the roadway.
Keep it tight to the right curb.
Exactly. This helps maintain a predictable path for other drivers, avoids wide swings that could confuse oncoming traffic, or endanger pedestrians in the crosswalk. It's about being efficient and clear in your movement.
And for left turns, those always seem a bit more complex, more variables involved.
They're generally more complex. To make a left turn at an intersection, you shall approach the intersection in the extreme left-hand lane lawfully available for traffic moving in your direction.
Get all the way over to the left lane available for your direction.
Right. Then, after entering the intersection, you turn so as to arrive in a lane lawfully available to traffic moving in the direction of the vehicle on the roadway being entered.
So turn into the correct corresponding lane on the new street.
Yes. On typical two-way streets, the law also specifies you should, to the extent practicable, turn in the portion of the intersection to the left of the center of the intersection. And for a left turn from a one-way street onto another one-way street, it's as closely as practicable to the left-hand curb or edge.
And local signs can change this.
Always pay attention to local signs and markings. Authorities can install traffic control devices that require a different path for turns, like designated turn lanes with specific paths.
What about turning on curves or near the crest of a hill? Like making a U-turn where you can't see very far. Is there a specific rule for that?
Yes, the law is very specific about visibility here. You may not turn the vehicle to move in the opposite direction, essentially a U-turn, when approaching a curve or the crest of a grade, a hill, if your vehicle is not visible to the operator of another vehicle approaching from either direction within 500 feet.
500 feet? That's quite a distance. If you can't see that far, no U-turn.
Correct. It's a clear safety measure to prevent sudden, unexpected maneuvers right where oncoming traffic wouldn't see you until it's too late. Could easily lead to a severe collision.
Makes perfect sense. Visibility is absolutely key there. And then there's sort of an overarching safety rule that applies to all turning movements, isn't there?
Yes, this is really the foundational common sense rule that underpins all the other turning regulations. It states you may not turn the vehicle to enter a private road or driveway, otherwise turn the vehicle from a direct course, or move right or left on a roadway unless movement can be made safely.
Unless it can be made safely. That seems broad but crucial.
It is. It implies that even if a maneuver is technically permitted by other rules, maybe you're allowed to change lanes there if it's unsafe in the current conditions.
Yeah.
Heavy rain, icy roads, another car too close, poor visibility, you shouldn't do it.
This raises an important question. How do drivers determine safe in that split second?
That's where driver judgment comes in. It relies on constant situational awareness, anticipating what other drivers might do, and always prioritizing safety over convenience or speed. If in doubt, wait.
Good judgment is definitely key. Now let's talk about signaling. When and how are you supposed to signal your turns and stops? I think most of us know to use our blinkers, but there's probably more nuance to it in the law.
There is. First, the law says you shall use the signal to indicate an intention to turn, change lanes, or start from a parked position. So signal for all those intentional lateral movements.
And how long do you need to signal for?
The signal duration is also important. You must signal continuously for not less than the last 100 feet of movement before the turn.
100 feet before. So no last second flick of the blinker right as you're turning or changing lanes. Give people warning.
Exactly. It prevents confusion and gives other drivers time to react to what you're planning to do.
Now, what about common practices that might actually be illegal or at least discouraged by the law? Like, I've seen people flash their turn signal to tell the car behind them it's okay to pass. Is that legal?
That's a great example of a common but illegal gesture. The law explicitly states you may not light the signals on only one side of the vehicle on a parked or disabled vehicle, meaning don't use a single turn signal as a makeshift hazard light. Hazard lights are for that.
Okay.
And critically, you may not use the signals as a courtesy or do pass signal to the operator of another vehicle approaching from the rear.
So what does this all mean? No flashing your left turn signal to tell someone behind you it's clear to pass. That's definitely something you see.
Correct. That common do pass signal is actually illegal and potentially very dangerous. The driver behind might rely on your signal instead of ensuring the way is clear themselves, leading to a head-on collision if you misjudged oncoming traffic. It can lead to serious miscommunication and accidents.
Wow, that's a surprise to many, I'm sure. What about signaling stops or sudden decreases in speed? You have to signal that?
Yes, you may not stop or suddenly decrease the speed without first giving a stop signal to the operator of a vehicle immediately to the rear when there's an opportunity to give the signal.
So hitting your brakes suddenly without warning isn't just dangerous, it could be a violation if you had time to signal.
Right. This is primarily done with your brake lights, which automatically signal a stop or slowing. But the law also recognizes hand and arm signals as a valid method.
And speaking of hand and arm signals, are they still legally recognized even with all our modern cars having turn signals and brake lights?
Yes, they absolutely are still legally defined. The law says you can signal by hand and arm or by lighting signal lamps, your turn signals and brake lights.
But are they ever required anymore?
Well, the law has specific vehicle dimension rules, basically. If the distance from the center of your steering wheel to the left edge of your vehicle load is more than 2 feet, or the distance from the steering wheel to the rearmost limit of your vehicle load is more than 14 feet, then signal lamps are required.
Which covers pretty much every modern car and truck.
Exactly. Most modern vehicles are wide and long enough that signal lamps are always required. But if for some reason your signal lamps aren't working, or maybe you're on a bicycle where hand signals are very common, they're still legally defined and valid.
Can you remind us what those hand signals are?
Sure. For a left turn, you extend your hand and arm horizontally out the left window. For a right turn, you extend your hand and arm upward from the elbow. Bicycle operators have the option of extending their right arm horizontally for a right turn, and to stop or decrease speed, you extend your hand and arm downward.
All right, figuring out who goes first right of way. This is probably one of the most common points of confusion and conflict on the road. It leads to hesitation, sometimes frustration, sometimes accidents. The law tries to create a clear hierarchy. Let's tackle right of way at intersections first.
The rules for intersections are absolutely foundational for predictable, safe traffic flow. The first principle is, if there's a traffic control device presents a stop sign, a yield sign, or a traffic light, even if the light is dark and not working, you shall stop, yield, and grant immediate use of the intersection.
Stop, yield, let others go first if needed.
Yes. After stopping, you may proceed only when it's safe, and doing so won't interfere with other traffic already in or approaching the intersection. This is your primary directive at any controlled intersection.
That seems crystal clear. What about situations where smaller streets meet larger ones, especially if there aren't specific signs controlling your approach?
Good question. If you're on a single-lane or two-lane street approaching an intersection with a divided highway, or a street with 3 or more marked traffic lanes, and there's no traffic control device governing your approach, you shall stop, yield, and grant immediate use of the intersection to a vehicle on the other street or roadway that is within the intersection or approaching, in such proximity as to be a hazard.
Meaning traffic on the bigger, busier road generally gets priority.
That's the idea. Similarly, if you're approaching on an unpaved street or road and crossing a paved one, you must stop and yield to vehicles on the paved road that pose a hazard. Paved roads generally take precedence over unpaved.
So what does this all mean for those truly uncontrolled intersections? The ones where there are absolutely no signs or signals for anyone? Is the old yield to the right rule still the standard in Texas?
Yes, it absolutely is, except for those specific scenarios we just mentioned,
Mhm.
like approaching a bigger or paved road. At a truly uncontrolled intersection, the rule is you shall stop, yield, and grant immediate use of the intersection to a vehicle that has entered the intersection from the operator's right or is approaching the intersection from the operator's right in a proximity that is a hazard.
So look right, yield to anyone coming from your right if it's a potential conflict.
Exactly. It's often referred to as the first vehicle rule or the vehicle on the right rule. It establishes a clear default priority.
What about T intersections where your road ends and merges into another, assuming no signs there either?
At an uncontrolled T intersection where your road terminates, you shall stop, yield, and grant immediate use of the intersection to another vehicle that has entered the intersection or is approaching in a proximity that is a hazard. Basically, the traffic on the through street has the right-of-way.
And what happens if you don't yield when you're supposed to and there's a collision?
The law is pretty clear. If you were required to stop and yield the right-of-way by a sign or by these rules,
Yeah.
and you're involved in a collision or interfere with other traffic, you are presumed not to have yielded.
That's a strong legal presumption against you. It could have significant consequences for determining fault in an accident.
Very significant, yes.
Next up, left turns. Who has the right of way when you're turning left at an intersection? This seems like a constant source of conflict and near misses.
It is. The rule is, when turning left at an intersection or turning left into an alley, private road or driveway, you shall yield the right-of-way to a vehicle that is approaching from the opposite direction and that is in the intersection or in such proximity as to be an immediate hazard.
So oncoming straight through traffic almost always has priority over someone turning left across their path.
Almost always, yes. You, the left-turning driver, must wait until you have a clear, safe gap in oncoming traffic before initiating your turn. Don't force the issue.
In yield signs, some drivers treat them like stop signs, others barely slow down. What does the law actually require at a yield sign?
If you're approaching a yield sign, you shall slow to a speed that is reasonable for the existing conditions. You don't necessarily have to come to a complete stop every time.
Okay, slow down. Then what?
Then you yield the right-of-way to a vehicle in the intersection or approaching on the intersecting roadway so closely as to be an immediate hazard. If necessary for safety, you must stop before entering the crosswalk or intersection.
So it's not always a full stop, but it requires a significant slowdown and definitely giving priority to cross traffic.
Right, and critically, the law adds that if a collision occurs after you pass a yield sign without stopping, it's considered prima facie evidence that you failed to yield.
Another one of those presumptions against you emphasizes the seriousness of that yield requirement.
Exactly. Treat yield signs with respect. They mean you don't automatically have the right-of-way.
Let's talk about entering or leaving highways and private roads, especially those access or feeder roads alongside limited access highways, like interstates. This is a common point of confusion, and I think the rule sometimes goes against instinct.
It really is a frequent point of confusion.
Yeah.
The rule states that if you're on an access or feeder road, like a frontage road, of a limited or controlled access highway, you shall yield the right-of-way to a vehicle entering or about to enter the access or feeder road from the highway or are leaving or about to leave the access or feeder road to enter the highway.
Okay, wait. This raises an important question. It's counterintuitive for many drivers. We're often taught to yield to traffic already on the road we're entering. But this rule covers traffic entering or leaving the main highway, right?
That's the tricky part. It gives priority to vehicles transitioning between the main highway lanes and the feeder road, even over traffic already established on the feeder road itself.
So to clarify, if I'm driving along the frontage road and someone is coming down the exit ramp off the main highway to get onto the frontage road, they have the right of way over me even though I'm already on the frontage road.
According to this section, yes, that vehicle exiting the main highway has priority in that transition moment. The same applies to vehicles entering the main highway from the feeder road. Traffic on the feeder should yield to them as they make that transition onto the entrance ramp.
That's fascinating. It's about prioritizing the flow onto and off of the high-speed main lanes.
That seems to be the logic, yes. It prioritizes those crucial transition points.
And what about just entering a highway from a completely private road or driveway, like pulling out of a shopping center?
That's more straightforward. If you're entering or crossing a highway from an alley, building, or private road or driveway, you shall yield the right-of-way to a vehicle approaching on the highway that is close enough to be a hazard. This ensures that traffic already established on the main public roadway isn't disrupted unexpectedly by vehicles emerging from private property.
Okay, let's shift to emergency vehicles. We all know we need to pull over and yield, but the law details exactly what's required. It's more than just a vague suggestion.
Absolutely. On the immediate approach of an authorized emergency vehicle, which means they're using audible and visual signals like lights and sirens, or if it's a police vehicle using only audible or visual signals, you shall yield the right-of-way.
And what does yielding mean in this context? What action do I take?
Your required action is very specific. You must immediately drive to a position parallel to and as close as possible to the right-hand edge or curb of the roadway, clear of any intersection. And you must stop and remain standing until the authorized emergency vehicle has passed.
Pull, right, stop, wait, clear of intersections.
Yes, it's important to note, though, that this section also states that it does not exempt the operator of the emergency vehicle from the duty to drive with due regard for the safety of all persons using the highway.
So even emergency vehicles have to drive safely. They can't just barrel through recklessly.
Correct. They have priority, but they still have a responsibility for overall safety.
Okay, let's unpack this. The move-over law. This is something we hear about often, but do we really know exactly what it requires and who it applies to? That difference between vacating a lane versus slowing down seems key. Let's really dig into what to do when passing certain stationary vehicles on the side of the road.
It absolutely is crucial, and the law takes it very seriously because it's about protecting vulnerable people, emergency responders, tow truck drivers, road crews on the side of the road. These are incredibly dangerous situations for them.
So which vehicles does this law cover? Is it just police and fire?
No, it's broader than that. It applies to several types of stationary vehicles that are displaying visual signals, usually flashing lights. This includes authorized emergency vehicles, police, fire, ambulance, tow trucks using authorized flashing lights while performing a tow, TXDOT, or highway maintenance, or construction vehicles if they are not separated from moving traffic by a traffic-controlled channelizing device, like cones, barrels, or a concrete barrier.
Ah, so if there are barriers, the rule might not apply.
Correct. If they're protected by barriers, the immediate danger isn't the same. It also applies to utility service vehicles, municipal solid waste, or recyclable material collection vehicles while they're actively working adjacent to the highway, and even vehicles operated by toll project entities, like maintenance crews on a toll road.
Okay, quite a list. So if I'm approaching one of these vehicles stopped on the shoulder or side of the road with its lights flashing, what exactly am I legally required to do?
Your required actions depend entirely on the road configuration. If you are on a highway with 2 or more lanes traveling in your direction, the law says you must vacate the lane closest to the vehicle.
Move over one full lane away from them.
Yes, if you can do so safely,
Mhm.
check your mirrors, signal, make sure the lane next to you is clear, and move over.
Okay, but what if I can't move over? Maybe traffic is too heavy in the next lane, or it's just a single lane road to begin with.
Right. In that case, if you cannot safely vacate the adjacent lane, or if you're on a roadway with only one lane for traffic in your direction, you must slow to a speed not to exceed. And here are the specific numbers. 0.20 miles per hour less than the posted speed limit when the posted speed limit is 25 miles per hour or more.
So if the speed limit is 60, I slow down to 40.
Correct. Or if the posted speed limit is less than 25 miles per hour, you must slow down to 5 miles per hour.
Wow, down to 5 miles per hour if the limit is already low, like 20 miles per hour. That's incredibly specific.
It is. It emphasizes how critical it is to reduce your speed significantly if you can't provide that buffer of an empty lane next to the stopped vehicle.
And I know the penalties for violating this move-over law are quite significant. It's not just a minor ticket.
They are very serious. A first offense is a misdemeanor punishable by a fine of not less than $500 or more than $1,250.
That's steep for a moving violation.
It gets steeper. A second or subsequent conviction within 5 years increases the fine range to $1,000 to $2,000. And it becomes much more serious if someone gets hurt. If the violation results in bodily injury to another person, like the worker or officer, it becomes a Class A misdemeanor. If it results in serious bodily injury, it's a state jail felony.
Wow, so potentially jail time for not moving over or slowing down if it causes an injury.
Yes, And your license can also be suspended. The state is very clear and very serious about protecting roadside workers and emergency personnel. These situations are inherently dangerous, and drivers need to give them space and slow down. Hashtag check 6. Special stops and speed restrictions.
Let's move on to some other situations requiring special stops, particularly around railroad grade crossings. These are inherently high-risk areas, and the law has very clear, sometimes maybe even surprising, requirements about stopping.
Absolutely. Railroad crossings demand extreme caution. For general crossing, the law says you shall stop not closer than 15 feet or farther than 50 feet from the nearest rail, under several conditions.
15 to 50 feet, that's a specific zone. What are the conditions requiring a stop?
You must stop if a railroad signal device, like flashing lights or bells, clearly warns of an approaching train or other on-track equipment, a crossing gate is lowered or being lowered, or a human flagger warns you of an approaching train. A train or on-track equipment is approaching within approximately 1,500 feet and emits an audible signal, like a horn, that makes it an immediate hazard. Or, simply if an approaching train or equipment is plainly visible and is in hazardous proximity to the crossing.
So basically, if you see the train, hear the train, or the signals are warning you, you stop in that 15 to 50-foot zone.
Correct. And after stopping, you must remain stopped until it's safe to proceed across the tracks. It's all about ensuring you have a clear view and safe passage before crossing.
What if it's a crossing with only the crossbuck signs, those X-shaped signs, but no automatic flashing lights or gates? Do you still have to stop?
Not automatically every time. If a crossing has only crossbuck signs, you shall yield the right-of-way to a train in hazardous proximity. You should approach and proceed at a speed that is reasonable for the conditions, allowing you to see clearly down the tracks. However, the law adds that if safety requires it, you must still stop within that 15 to 50 feet from the rail.
So even without signals, if a train is close, you yield and stop if necessary for safety.
Yes, and a definite prohibition. Driving around, under, or through a crossing gate or a barrier while it's closed, closing, or opening is explicitly forbidden and incredibly dangerous. Don't ever try to beat the gate.
And there's another presumption here, too.
Yes, similar to the yield sign rule. If a train was plainly visible and in hazardous proximity when you decided to cross, the law presumes it was unsafe for you to proceed.
And can authorities designate certain crossings as always requiring a stop, even if no train is visible?
Yes. TXDOT, or local authorities, can designate specific crossings as particularly dangerous and require all vehicles, or certain classes of vehicles, to stop at all times. They must erect stop signs or other official traffic control devices at these locations.
Beyond general vehicles, the law is incredibly stringent for certain types of vehicles at railroad crossings, isn't it? Like buses and trucks carrying hazardous materials.
Extremely stringent, yes, because of the inherent dangers they pose or the passengers they carry. For example, motor buses carrying passengers for hire must stop between 15 and 50 feet, listen and look in both directions, and not proceed until it's safe. And they must cross the tracks without manually shifting gears.
No shifting gears while crossing. Why is that?
To prevent stalling right on the tracks, same requirement applies to school buses, with very similar stopping, looking, and listening rules. Vehicles carrying explosive substances or flammable liquids as their principal cargo also have strict rules, often requiring stops, especially in municipalities, and always requiring careful looking and listening before proceeding.
And even heavy equipment.
Yes, things like crawler-type tractors, steam shovels, derricks, rollers, things with very slow speed or low ground clearance that could get stuck, have special rules. They often need to notify a railroad agent in advance, must stop 15-50 feet away, listen and look, and only cross when it's safe or under a flagger's direction. These detailed rules exist because a collision between a train and any vehicle is almost always catastrophic.
That's a lot of detail just for railroad crossings. It really highlights how seriously the state takes safety at these intersections. What about reporting violations? Can anyone report someone driving unsafely at a crossing?
Interestingly, the law specifically allows on-engine employees of a railroad, like engineers or conductors, who observe a violation of these crossing rules, like driving around gates, to file a written report with law enforcement within 72 hours.
So the train crew can report bad drivers they see.
Yes, on an approved form, providing details like the license plate, vehicle description, time, and location. Peace officers can then investigate based on that report and request the driver's information from the registered vehicle owner. It provides a mechanism for enforcing these critical safety rules even when an officer isn't present.
Okay, shifting away from railroads. What about emerging from an alley, driveway, or building, pulling out into a street? This is a common maneuver, but there's a clear hierarchy of who has the right of way.
Absolutely. When you're emerging from an alley, driveway, or building within a business or residence district, the law says you shall stop the vehicle before moving on a sidewalk or the sidewalk area.
Stop before the sidewalk.
Yes. Then you must yield the right-of-way to a pedestrian to avoid collision. Pedestrians on the sidewalk always have top priority.
After checking for pedestrians.
Only after yielding to pedestrians, on entering the roadway, yield the right-of-way to an approaching vehicle that is close enough to be a hazard. This rule establishes that clear hierarchy. Stop before the sidewalk, yield to pedestrians, then yield to traffic on the street. It's a common area for accidents if people just pull out without stopping and looking carefully.
Now, let's really dive back into speed, starting with the foundational principle, the maximum speed requirement. It's not just about hitting a number on a sign, is it?
No, it's far more nuanced than that. The golden rule, the absolute bedrock of speed law, is you may not drive at a speed greater than is reasonable and prudent under the circumstances then existing.
Reasonable and prudent under the circumstance.
Yes. This means your speed must constantly be controlled as necessary to avoid colliding with another person or vehicle that is on or entering the highway in compliance with law and the duty of each person to use due care. It places a significant ongoing responsibility on you, the driver, to assess the situation constantly and adjust your speed accordingly.
So even if the posted speed limit is, say, 70 mile per hour, if it's pouring rain or there's heavy fog or dense traffic, you could still be ticketed for driving too fast even if you're going 60 mile per hour. That's a lot of judgment required from the driver.
It truly is. The law explicitly requires you to drive at an appropriate reduced speed if you are approaching or crossing an intersection or railroad grade crossing, approaching or going around a curve, approaching a hill crest, traveling on a narrow or winding roadway, or if a special hazard exists due to pedestrians, traffic, weather, or highway conditions.
So slowing down for hazards isn't just good advice, it's legally required.
Exactly. It emphasizes that defensive driving and adapting your speed to your environment are not just best practices, they are legally mandated responsibilities.
That leads perfectly into the concept of prima facie speed limits. What exactly does prima facie mean in this legal context?
Prima facie is Latin, meaning at first sight or on the face of it. In the context of speed limits, exceeding these established limits is considered prima facie evidence that your speed was not reasonable and prudent, and therefore it was unlawful.
So it's not an absolute, you go 1 mile over, you're automatically guilty limit.
Not technically absolute, but it creates a strong legal presumption against you. If you're ticketed for exceeding a prima facie limit, the burden effectively shifts to you to prove that your speed was actually reasonable and prudent under the specific circumstances, which can be difficult. For practical purposes, you should treat these as the maximum lawful speed under good conditions.
Okay, so what are these default prima facie lawful speeds in Texas, assuming there are no special hazards requiring you to go slower?
Generally, in an urban district, which is defined based on structure density, the limit is 30 mile per hour on streets, but not alleys, and 15 mile per hour in alleys.
30 mile per hour in town unless posted otherwise.
Correct. Outside of an urban district, on a numbered highway like a state highway, U.S. highway, or interstate, the limit is generally 70 mile per hour. On an unnumbered highway outside an urban district, like a farm-to-market road or county road, the limit is generally 60 mile per hour.
70 on highways, 60 on county roads, outside towns, got it. Any others?
Yes, school buses have specific prima facie limits. If traveling on a numbered U.S. or state highway, they can go up to 60 mile per hour if the bus has passed a commercial motor vehicle inspection. Otherwise, or if traveling on an unnumbered highway, the limit for a school bus is 50 mile per hour. And on a beach or a county road adjacent to a public beach where vehicle traffic is permitted, the limit is 15 mile per hour.
It's interesting about the school bus inspection affecting its speed limit. What about other types of vehicles, like light trucks or passenger buses? Do they have different limits?
Generally, no. The law specifies that passenger buses operated for hire, highway post office vehicles, light trucks, defined as pickup, panel delivery, or carry-all trucks with a capacity of 2,000 pounds or less, and school activity buses have the same prima facie speed limits as passenger cars at the same time and location.
So a pickup truck doesn't automatically have a lower speed limit than a car on the highway.
Correct, not based on these defaults. Also, an important point. Any speed limit established under this section must be the same for daytime and nighttime. No separate night speed limits anymore.
That's a great overview of the default speeds. But we all know speed limits can be changed from these defaults. Who has the authority to alter speed limits And how do they go about it?
Several entities have this authority. The most significant is the Texas Transportation Commission, TXDOT, which has broad authority over the state highway system, interstates, U.S. highways, state highways, FM roads.
How does TXDOT change a speed limit?
They must conduct an engineering and traffic investigation. This involves studying the road's design, traffic volume and patterns, accident history, and other circumstances to determine what speed is reasonable and safe for that specific stretch of highway. If the study warrants a change, the Commission can declare a new limit by order, and then TXDOT must erect signs posting that new limit.
Can they set limits higher than the 70-mile-per-hour default on highways?
Yes, they can set 75 miles per hour generally where the investigation supports it. On specific segments of Interstate 10 and Interstate 20 in certain sparsely populated West Texas counties like Crockett, Culberson, Hudspeth, Jeff Davis, Pecos, Reeves, Sutton Ward, they can establish limits up to 80 miles per hour.
And then there's the famous 85-mile-per-hour zone. That 85-mile-per-hour limit is pretty wild to think about. What goes into that kind of decision? It feels almost futuristic or maybe reckless to some.
It's entirely about the road's design and confirmed safety. The law specifically allows TXDOT to establish a speed limit of up to 85 miles per hour on parts of the state highway system, only if that part of the highway is designed to accommodate travel at that established speed or a higher speed. And the engineering and traffic investigation determines that the 85 mile per hour limit is reasonable and safe.
So the road itself has to be built for it, wide lanes, gentle curves, long sight distances, etc.
Exactly. It's not a decision made lightly. It reflects advancements in highway engineering and vehicle capabilities, but it's grounded in rigorous safety analysis for those specific suitable stretches of road. It's currently only implemented on a specific segment of State Highway 130.
What about those digital signs we see more often now, the ones that change the speed limit based on current conditions like weather or traffic jams?
That's TXDOT's Variable Speed Limit Program. The law allows TXDOT to implement temporary lowering of prima facie speed limits.
Yeah.
But the lowered limit must be at least 10 miles per hour below the normally posted prima facie limit to address specific conditions.
What kind of conditions?
Things like inclement weather, fog, heavy rain, ice, congestion, road construction, or really any other condition affecting safe and orderly traffic flow. These variable limits must be displayed on changeable message signs.
This highlights how dynamic speed limits can be now. It's not just about the static signs anymore.
Absolutely. It requires drivers to be more attentive to electronic signs, as the legal limit can change based on real-time conditions. It's a critical safety tool.
And there's a protection against using it just to generate toll revenue.
Yes, the law explicitly states that the Variable Speed Limit Program may not authorize the lowering of a speed limit to divert traffic to a toll road for the purpose of increasing revenue from toll charges.
It's a good safeguard. Who else besides the main TXDOT Commission can alter speed limits?
A TXDOT district engineer can temporarily lower speed limits on state highways for specific highway maintenance activities, but only for up to 45 days or until the work is completed, whichever is sooner. This allows for quicker implementation for short-term maintenance needs.
What about counties and cities? Can they set their own speed limits?
Yes. County commissioners' courts have authority over county roads, those outside the state highway system and outside municipal limits. They can alter the prima facie limits on these roads based on an engineering and traffic study. They can increase limits up to 70 miles per hour or lower them down to 30 miles per hour generally, or even 20 miles per hour in residential areas or near schools under certain conditions.
And municipalities, cities and towns.
Municipalities, cities, have similar authority within their corporate limits. They can alter the prima facie limits on streets and highways within their jurisdiction, including segments of state highways, again, based on an engineering and traffic investigation conducted by the city. They can lower limits, for instance, down to 25 miles per hour on two-lane undivided roads in residential areas, or even 10 miles per hour in very small towns on specific one-lane roads near the town center, under specific conditions.
Do cities have any extra requirements if they lower limits?
Yes, if a municipality lowers a speed limit below 30 miles of area or 20 miles per hour in a school zone, they have specific reporting requirements. They must publish an annual report comparing traffic citation and warning data with collision data for that lower speed zone, adding a layer of accountability.
I've also seen temporary speed limit reductions around accident scenes when police are investigating. Is that covered?
Yes, both municipalities and counties have the authority to temporarily lower speed limits at vehicular collision investigation sites when collision reconstruction is underway, ensuring safety for the investigators.
What about school zones? Who sets those limits?
The process for school zones often involves collaboration. The governing bodies of schools or higher education institutions can request annual public hearings with the relevant transportation authority, could be the city, county, or TXDOT, depending on who controls the road, to discuss speed limits on roads near their campuses. Following the hearing, they can request an engineering investigation to potentially alter the limits. This explains why school zones can have variable times or unusually low limits during specific hours.
And after a work zone ends.
Any entity, TXDOT, city, county, that sets a lower speed limit for a construction or maintenance work zone must place a sign at the end of the work zone indicating the speed limit that applies after the zone. This helps drivers know when it's okay to resume the normal speed.
Lastly, for speed, while everyone focuses on maximum speed, there's also the concept of a minimum speed. What does the law say about driving too slowly?
This is often overlooked, but equally important for smooth and safe traffic flow. The law states you may not drive so slowly as to impede the normal and reasonable movement of traffic, unless a reduced speed is necessary for safe operation or because you're complying with the law, like approaching a stop sign.
So driving excessively slow without reason can actually be illegal.
Yes, if it impedes the normal flow. Furthermore, authorities like TXDOT, Turnpike Authority, counties, cities can establish specific minimum speed limits on highways or parts of highways where consistently slow speeds are found to impede traffic flow. This requires an engineering and traffic study, and signs posting the minimum speed must be erected.
This raises an important question. Many drivers focus only on the maximum speed, but minimums are equally important for overall traffic flow and safety.
Absolutely. Think of traffic like a river. If part of it moves too slowly without reason, it creates backups, unpredictable merging situations, and frustration, which can ironically lead to more dangerous conditions than slightly faster but smoother and more predictable traffic flow. Both extremes can be problematic.
Now let's look at where and how you can legally stop, stand, and park your vehicle. These rules might seem a bit mundane, but they're absolutely critical for preventing congestion, ensuring visibility, and maintaining safety, especially when stopping outside of regular business or residential districts.
That's right. When you're outside a business or residence district, the general rule is you may not stop, park, or leave standing an attended or unattended vehicle on the main traveled part of a highway.
So stay off the main road if possible.
Exactly. The exceptions are if stopping off the main traveled part isn't practical, and a width of the highway beside your stopped vehicle is left unobstructed for other vehicles to pass, and your stopped vehicle is in clear view for at least 200 feet in each direction on the highway.
So if you absolutely must stop on the highway, shoulder, or edge, make sure people can see you from far away and can get around you.
That's the idea. Generally, if you can pull completely off the pavement, you should.
Are there specific exceptions to this rule? Like, what if your car breaks down right there on the highway?
Yes, the rule doesn't apply if your vehicle is disabled in such a way that it's impossible to avoid stopping and leaving it temporarily on the main traveled part of the highway. It also provides exceptions for waste transport vehicles operated in connection with waste removal adjacent to the highway, or for tow trucks performing official duties. These exceptions acknowledge the practical necessities of certain situations.
Okay, now for the absolute don'ts. There are places where stopping, standing, or parking is strictly prohibited under almost any circumstance. What are some of those common violations we should all be aware of?
Think of it as different levels of restriction. Some places, you absolutely cannot stop, stand, or park even for a second because it's inherently dangerous or obstructive. The law lists these absolute prohibitions.
Like what?
On the roadway side of any vehicle already stopped or parked at the edge or curb that's double parking. On a sidewalk, in an intersection, on a crosswalk, between a safety zone, like a designated island for pedestrians, and the adjacent curb, or within 30 feet of points on the curb opposite the ends of a safety zone. Alongside or opposite any street excavation or obstruction if stopping there would obstruct traffic. On any bridge or other elevated structure on a highway or within a highway tunnel. On any railroad track. And of course, anywhere an official sign explicitly prohibits stopping.
So those are the places you can't even pause momentarily. What about places designated as no standing? What's the difference?
Standing is a slightly lesser restriction than stopping. In a no-standing zone, you may not, except momentarily to pick up or discharge a passenger, stand or park an occupied or unoccupied vehicle. So a very quick drop-off or pickup might be okay, but you can't wait there.
Where are these no standing zones typically found?
The law lists several. In front of a public or private driveway, within 15 feet of a fire hydrant, within 20 feet of a crosswalk at an intersection, within 30 feet upon the approach to any flashing signal, stop sign, yield sign, or traffic control signal located at the side of a roadway, within 20 feet of the driveway entrance to any fire station, and on the side of a street opposite the entrance, within 75 feet if properly marked. And again, anywhere an official sign prohibits standing.
Okay, so quick passenger exchange might be okay, but no leaving the car or waiting. And then there's no parking. What's the distinction there? Can you load or unload?
Yes, that's the key difference. In a no parking zone, you cannot park an occupied or unoccupied vehicle, except temporarily for the purpose of, and will actually engage in, loading or unloading merchandise or passengers.
So moving boxes or letting multiple people in or out might be okay, but you can't just leave the car there indefinitely.
Correct. The main places specified for no parking, besides where signs say so, are within 50 feet of the nearest rail of a railroad crossing.
That's quite a distance from the tracks.
It is, for safety and visibility. Interestingly, the law specifically allows bicycles to be stopped, stood, or parked on a sidewalk if doing so doesn't impede normal pedestrian movement. And of course, none of these stopping, standing, or parking rules apply if stopping is necessary to avoid conflict with other traffic, or if you're complying with the directions of a police officer or an official traffic control device.
What about how you actually park? Parallel parking seems universal, but the law has specific requirements about how close to the curb you need to be, right?
Yes. When parallel parking on a two-way roadway, your right-hand wheels must be parallel to and within 18 inches of the right-hand curb or edge of the roadway.
Within 18 inches, that's the target. What about a one-way street?
On a one-way roadway, you can park parallel to the curb on either side, but your wheels closest to the curb must be within 18 inches of that curb, either the right or left curb, unless a local ordinance specifies differently for that street.
And angle parking.
Local authorities, like cities, can permit angle parking by ordinance on roadways under their jurisdiction. However, they generally cannot permit angle parking on any state or federal highway unless TxDOT has determined that the roadway is wide enough to permit angle parking without interfering with the free movement of traffic.
What about moving someone else's car? Is that addressed?
Yes, the law says a person may not move a vehicle that is not lawfully under the person's control, either into a prohibited parking area or away from the curb an unlawful distance. This prevents unauthorized tampering or moving of vehicles into illegal or unsafe positions.
Now, the removal of unlawfully stopped vehicles by authorities, when can they actually tow your car? This seems to cover quite a wide range of situations.
It does. Peace officers or license and weight inspectors from the Department of Public Safety have broad authority to remove or require the driver or person in charge to remove a vehicle from a highway or bridge under several circumstances.
Such as?
If the vehicle is left unattended on a bridge, viaduct, causeway, or in a tunnel where it obstructs traffic, if it's unlawfully parked and blocking the entrance to a private driveway, if it has been reported stolen or identified as stolen, if it's left unattended on public property, other than a toll road, for more than 48 hours.
48 hours for abandonment, okay.
If the vehicle is disabled and the owner or operator is incapacitated, absent, or fails to designate a competent towing company within a reasonable time. If the operator is arrested for an alleged offense and is taken into custody, and the vehicle would be left unattended. Or if, in the officer's opinion, the vehicle is a hazard, interferes with the normal function of a governmental agency, or is imperiled by a catastrophe like a flood or fire or other emergency.
That covers a lot of ground. And if your car gets towed under these circumstances,
the owner is liable for all reasonable towing and storage fees incurred. You have to pay those fees to get your vehicle back.
and it seems there's an even broader power for authorities to remove any personal property from the roadway if it's a hazard, not just vehicles.
Yes, this is quite a powerful provision for clearing roads quickly. An authority, which includes transportation authorities like TxDOT, transit agencies, cities, counties, a fire department, or a law enforcement agency can remove any personal property from a roadway or right-of-way if it blocks the roadway or endangers public safety.
What counts as personal property here?
It explicitly includes vehicles, spilled cargo, hazardous materials, or even things like unattended manufactured homes, mobile homes. And crucially, this removal can be done without the owner's consent.
Without consent? Wow, who pays?
The owner or the carrier of the property is required to reimburse the agency for the costs of removal and disposition. The agencies involved are generally granted immunity from liability for damage caused during the removal, unless it's done recklessly or in a grossly negligent manner. This ensures roadways can be cleared promptly in emergency situations, prioritizing public safety above all else.
Finally, let's talk about overnight parking of commercial motor vehicles in residential areas. That's a common neighborhood concern. Big trucks parked on streets, potentially making noise or blocking views.
This is a great example of how the law allows local communities to tailor traffic regulations to address specific neighborhood concerns. The law provides a framework. Generally, parking a commercial motor vehicle is prohibited between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. on streets within a residential subdivision or on streets adjacent to a residential subdivision, specifically within 1,000 feet of the property line of a residence, school, place of worship, or park.
But only if signs are posted, right?
Correct. This prohibition only applies if signs are posted giving notice of the restriction.
Are there exceptions, like if the truck is making a delivery?
Yes, there are exceptions. The prohibition doesn't apply if the commercial vehicle is actively transporting persons or property to or from the residential subdivision, or actively performing work in the subdivision, but only for the period necessary to do so. It also doesn't apply to certain utility vehicles parked at an employee's residence if the employee is on call 24/7, or to vehicles parked adjacent to a commercial establishment if they belong to that establishment.
How did those signs get put up? Can residents request them?
Yes. Residents can petition their county or municipality, depending on who maintains the street, to post these no overnight commercial vehicle parking signs. The petition typically requires signatures from at least 25% of the owners or tenants, aged 18 plus, residing within 500 feet of the proposed restricted area. The county or municipality may charge the residents for the cost of installing and maintaining the signs.
So residents can take action if it's a problem. And there's a similar, slightly different rule specifically for large apartment complexes in very populous counties.
Yes, in counties with a population greater than 3.3 million, essentially Harris County, the owner or manager of an apartment complex can request the county to post no overnight parking signs, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., in the public right-of-way adjacent to the complex, specifically targeting commercial motor vehicles. This gives apartment communities a tool to manage parking issues related to large commercial vehicles that might otherwise create congestion, noise, or safety concerns for their residents.
We touched on speed earlier, but let's really circle back and reinforce some key takeaways about speed restrictions. The maximum speed requirement, that idea of reasonable and prudent, is really the foundation, isn't it? More important than just the number on the sign.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
It bears repeating because it's so fundamental to safe driving and understanding potential liability. You may not drive at a speed greater than is reasonable and prudent under the circumstances then existing. That means you have to constantly assess the conditions, traffic, weather, visibility, road conditions, pedestrians, and adjust your speed accordingly.
So your speed must always be controlled as necessary to avoid colliding with another person or vehicle. It puts a huge emphasis on constant awareness and anticipating hazards.
Precisely. And the law even lists specific situations where you must reduce speed. Approaching intersections or railroad crossings, going around curves, approaching hill crests on narrow or winding roads, or when any special hazard exists. It's not just advice, it's a legal duty to slow down when conditions demand it.
That leads back to the prima facie speed limits. Remind us again what prima facie means and what those default speeds are in Texas.
Prima facie means exceeding these speeds is presumed unlawful. It's evidence on its face that your speed wasn't reasonable or prudent. The defaults, unless otherwise posted or hazards require slower speeds, are 30 mile per hour in urban districts, 15 in alleys, 70 mile per hour on numbered highways outside urban areas, 60 mile per hour on unnumbered highways outside urban areas, 60 mile per hour or 50 mile per hour for school buses depending on inspection and road type, and 15 mile per hour on beaches or adjacent county roads.
And remember, light trucks, buses, and school activity buses generally have the same limits as cars, and day-night limits must be the same. Now, who can change these default limits? We covered TXDOT, counties, and cities.
Right. TXDOT sets limits on state highways based on engineering studies, potentially up to 75, 80, or even 85 mile per hour on specially designed roads. They also manage the variable speed limit program, using electronic signs to temporarily lower limits for weather, congestion, or construction.
That 85 mile per hour zone still stands out. It really highlights how road design dictates potential speed.
It's all about infrastructure safety. The road must be built to handle it. TXDOT district engineers can also temporarily lower limits for maintenance. Counties set limits on county roads, and municipalities set them within city limits, even on state highways passing through, all based on engineering studies.
And they can set them quite low in certain residential or downtown areas.
Yes, down to 25 mile per hour or even 10 mile per hour in very specific circumstances, with reporting requirements for accountability. Temporary reductions are also allowed for collision reconstruction sites. and schools can request reviews and potential changes to limits near their campuses.
And don't forget the sign at the end of a work zone telling you the new speed limit.
Crucial for knowing when to speed back up safely.
Finally, let's re-emphasize minimum speed regulations. Driving too slow can be illegal too.
Correct. You may not drive so slowly as to impede the normal and reasonable movement of traffic, unless necessary for safety or required by law. Authorities can also establish and post official minimum speed limits where slow driving is a chronic problem.
It raises that important question again. Many drivers focus only on the maximum, but minimums are equally vital for smooth, safe traffic flow.
Exactly. Impeding traffic by driving excessively slow without reason can create dangerous backups and merging conflicts, just like speeding can. Both ends of the spectrum matter for overall road safety. Hashtag tag ILX. Miscellaneous but crucial rules for the road.
Beyond the big categories like speed and turns, Chapter 545 contains a lot of miscellaneous but still crucial rules governing general driving conduct, passenger safety, and specific situations you might encounter. Let's start with reckless driving. This sounds serious, more than just a mistake.
It is. The law defines it as driving in willful or wanton disregard for the safety of persons or property. This isn't simple negligence. It implies a deliberate or knowing disregard for potential harm. It's a misdemeanor, carrying potential fines and jail time.
Where does this apply? Just on public roads?
It applies broadly on highways, other public places, and even on a private access way or parking area provided for a client or patron by a business, think shopping center parking lots, but not residential property or paid garages. It also explicitly applies to vehicles engaged in road work.
What about just starting up a parked car? Even that has a specific safety rule.
A very simple one. An operator may not begin movement of a stopped, standing, or parked vehicle unless the movement can be made safely. Look before you pull out. And similarly, you may not drive through or in a safety zone meant for pedestrians.
Then there's the rule for mountain highways. We might not have many towering peaks in Texas, but we certainly have hilly, winding roads with limited visibility.
Indeed. On such roads, defiles, canyons, mountain highways, you must hold the vehicle under control and as near the right-hand edge of the highway as possible. And here's where it gets really interesting again. On approaching a curve that obstructs a view for 200 feet, the law says you must give warning with the horn of the motor vehicle.
Honk on blind curves. That's a specific legal requirement, not just an old-fashioned suggestion.
Yes, it's about providing an audible warning when visual cues are limited. An old-school safety measure still embedded in the law.
That's fascinating. And coasting downhill in neutral is prohibited. I didn't even know that was something the law would address.
It is. You may not coast with the gears or transmission of the vehicle in neutral when going down a grade. For trucks, tractors, or buses, they also cannot coast with the clutch disengaged. This is purely a safety measure to ensure drivers maintain full control and engine braking capability, preventing potential loss of control on downgrades.
Racing on the highway, obviously illegal, but the law details the types of prohibited activities and the penalties seem really severe.
They are severe, and the law is specific. You may not participate in any manner of a race, a speed competition, a drag race or acceleration contest, a test of operator endurance over a route, or an exhibition of speed or acceleration connected to drag racing. It defines drag race and race broadly to cover various competitive speed scenarios.
And the penalties.
It starts as a Class B misdemeanor, but escalates dramatically based on aggravating factors. Prior convictions for racing, being intoxicated, DWI, during the race, having an open container of alcohol, or if the racing causes bodily injury, serious bodily injury, or death. These escalations can take it all the way up to a second-degree felony, which carries punishment similar to manslaughter.
Wow. And the vehicle gets impounded.
Yes, the law states a peace officer shall require the vehicle used in the racing offense to be taken to a licensed storage facility. The owner is liable for all towing and storage fees and can't get the vehicle back until those are paid. It's a very clear and harsh consequence aimed at deterring this incredibly dangerous behavior.
And there's even a newer rule about interfering with a police investigation of racing or reckless driving.
Yes, added in 2021. It makes it a Class B misdemeanor to use your body, your car, or some kind of barricade to knowingly impede or otherwise interfere with a peace officer's investigation of racing or reckless driving exhibition. This targets spectators or participants who might try to block police or help offenders escape.
Fleeing or attempting to elude a police officer, another very serious charge.
Definitely. An offense occurs if you willfully fails or refuses to bring the vehicle to a stop or flees, or attempts to elude, a pursuing police vehicle, when given a visual or audible signal to bring the vehicle to a stop.
What constitutes a valid signal?
The officer giving the signal must be in uniform and prominently display their badge, or their vehicle must be appropriately marked as an official police vehicle.
What are the penalties for fleeing?
It's generally a Class B misdemeanor. However, it becomes a Class A misdemeanor if, during the flight, you recklessly engage in conduct that places another in imminent danger of serious bodily injury. There's a presumption of this recklessness if you are found to be intoxicated while fleeing.
Okay, what about driving on sidewalks or cutting through parking lots? Those are common shortcuts people take.
The law explicitly prohibits them. You may not drive a motor vehicle on a sidewalk area, or hike and bike trail, except on a permanent or authorized temporary driveway. Maintenance vehicles are exempt.
And cutting through private property.
Also addressed. First, an operator may not cross a sidewalk or drive through a driveway, parking lot, or business or residential entrance without stopping the vehicle. You have to stop before entering that private area from the street. Second, and this is the key one for shortcuts, you may not cross or drive in or on a sidewalk, driveway, parking lot, or business or residential entrance at an intersection to turn right or left from one highway to another highway.
So cutting through that corner gas station lot to avoid the red light, illegal.
Precisely. It's not only a safety hazard to pedestrians and other vehicles in the lot, but is a clear traffic violation specifically outlawed by this section.
Let's move to passenger and vehicle safety, starting with unattended motor vehicles. It's more than just turning off the engine, right?
Yes, the law requires several steps. You may not leave a vehicle unattended without stopping the engine, locking the ignition, removing the key from the ignition, setting the parking brake effectively, and if standing on a grade, turning the front wheels to the curb or side of the highway.
That's quite a checklist. Lock it, brake it, turn the wheels on a hill.
But there's a modern exception now. The rules about stopping the engine, locking the ignition, and removing the key do not apply if the vehicle has started using a remote starter system that requires the key to be in the ignition or physically present in the vehicle before the vehicle can be operated. This acknowledges new technology while still aiming for security.
What about interacting with emergency vehicles? Beyond yielding to them, are there rules about following too closely or obstructing them?
Yes, an operator, unless on official business, may not follow closer than 500 feet a fire apparatus responding to a fire alarm. You also may not drive into or park the vehicle in the block where the fire apparatus has stopped to answer a fire alarm.
Keep your distance from fire trucks.
And the same 500-foot following distance applies to an ambulance when its flashing red lights are operating. You also may not drive or park your vehicle in a way that interferes with the arrival or departure of an ambulance summoned for an emergency. Also, a specific rule: you may not, without the consent of the fire department official in command, drive over an unprotected fire hose if it's laid across the street for firefighting. These rules are all about letting emergency personnel do their critical work without interference.
Safety while towing is also covered, with rules about the connection itself and safety chains.
Right. The drawbar or connection used for towing must be strong enough for the weight being towed and generally shouldn't be more than 15 feet long, with exceptions for things like poles or structural objects that can't be easily dismembered. If you're using chains, ropes, or cables as the connection, you must display a white flag or cloth at least 12 inches square on the connection as a visibility warning. There's also a limit of drawing no more than 3 vehicles using the triple saddle mount method.
And safety chains, are they always required?
Critically, safety chains are required when a passenger car or light truck is towing a trailer, semi-trailer, house trailer, or another motor vehicle, unless it's purely for agricultural purposes. These chains must be approved by the department, meaning they meet certain standards, and must be strong enough to maintain the connection between the vehicles if the primary hitch or coupling fails. It's a vital backup system to prevent a dangerous runaway trailer situation.
Okay, this next one is super important for parents, grandparents, anyone driving young children. Child passenger safety seat systems. The law has evolved here. It's not just about age anymore. Height is also a factor.
Yes, this is absolutely critical. A person commits an offense if they operate a passenger vehicle, transport a child who is younger than 8 years of age, unless that child is taller than 4 feet 9 inches, and does not keep the child secured during the operation of the vehicle in a child passenger safety seat system, according to the manufacturer's instructions.
So under 8, unless they are taller than 4'9", they must be in an appropriate car seat or booster seat.
Correct. The penalty is a misdemeanor punishable by a fine of $25 to $250. There are defenses for emergencies, if transporting the child for law enforcement purposes, or if all seating positions equipped with safety belts or child safety seats are already occupied by other children.
And I heard there might be a way to get the ticket dismissed.
Yes, there's a provision for dismissal. If you are cited only for this offense, not arrested for anything else, weren't involved in a collision, and you subsequently provide proof to the court that you have obtained an appropriate child passenger safety seat system for the child, the judge may dismiss the charge. The focus is on getting kids into the right seats for safety.
That's good. Now, what about safety belts for older kids and adults? What are the requirements?
If you, the operator or passenger, are 15 years of age or older and riding in a passenger vehicle in a seat equipped with a safety belt, you must be secured by that safety belt while the vehicle is moving.
Simple enough. Buckle up if you're 15 or older. What about younger kids who've outgrown their booster seats but aren't 17 yet?
If you, the operator, are driving a passenger vehicle equipped with safety belts, and a child younger than 17, who is not required to be in a child safety seat under the rule we just discussed, is riding in a seat equipped with a safety belt, you, the operator, must require that child to be secured by the safety belt. This also applies to children riding in passenger vans designed for 15 or fewer passengers.
So the driver is responsible for making sure kids under 17 are buckled up.
Yes, the penalties are fines. $25 to $50 for the operator or adult passenger not wearing their belt. $100 to $200 for the operator failing to secure a child under 17 who isn't in a required car seat.
Are there exemptions to the seatbelt law?
Yes, specific ones. If you have a written statement from a licensed physician stating a medical reason prevents use, if you're a U.S. Postal Service carrier delivering mail, a newspaper delivery person on their route, a utility meter reader doing their job, or operating certain farm vehicles or solid waste service vehicles where frequent entry and exit are necessary.
Okay. What about riding in open beds of pickup trucks or on open flatbed trailers? I still see that sometimes, especially with kids.
It's generally an offense if an operator allows a child younger than 18 to occupy the open bed of a pickup truck, an open flatbed truck, or an open flatbed trailer while it's being operated on a highway.
Under 18 can't ride in the open bed. Are there defenses?
Yes, specific defenses apply if it's operated in a parade or emergency, transporting farm workers short distances between fields on specific roads, operated on a beach, if it's the only motor vehicle owned or operated by the members of that household, or if it's being used in a permitted hayride. Interestingly, evidence of this violation cannot be used in a civil trial.
What about riding in a boat or personal watercraft while it's being towed?
Similar rule, added more recently. It's an offense if an operator allows a child younger than 18 to occupy a boat or personal watercraft while it is being drawn by a motor vehicle on a highway. Defenses exist for parades, emergencies, or operating on a beach. The goal is clearly to prevent injuries to children in these exposed, unsafe positions while the vehicle is moving on roads.
Moving on to motorcycles and mopeds, what are the rules for riding posture and carrying passengers?
The operator must ride only on the permanent and regular seat attached. No passengers are allowed unless the motorcycle or moped is designed to carry more than one person and is equipped with footrests and handholds for the passenger. Passengers must ride on the proper seat.
Is there an age restriction for passengers?
Yes, a very important one. An operator may not carry another person on a motorcycle or moped unless the other person is at least 5 years of age. Violating this carries a fine of $100 to $200.
So no toddlers on the back of a motorcycle. What about sidecars?
That's the exception. You can carry a person younger than 5 if they are seated in a sidecar attached to the motorcycle or moped. Also, there's a rule for certain very small, limited design motorcycles. They cannot be operated on public highways with posted speed limits over 45 mph, except simply to cross an intersection of such a highway.
Any other general safety rules about how a vehicle can be loaded or how doors should be open?
Yes. Regarding loading and passengers in the front seat, you may not drive a vehicle when it is loaded or when the front seat has a number of persons exceeding 3 so that the view of the operator to the front or sides of the vehicle is obstructed, or there's interference with the operator's control over the driving mechanism. Passengers also cannot ride in a position that interferes with the driver's view or control.
Don't overcrowd the front seat or block the driver's view. Common sense, but good, it's codified. What about opening car doors?
You may not open the door of a motor vehicle on the side available to moving traffic, unless the door may be opened in reasonable safety without interfering with the movement of other traffic. Don't leave the door open on the traffic side longer than necessary to load or unload passengers. Check for traffic, especially cyclists, before opening your door.
And riding in trailers. I know house trailers are a definite no-go for passengers while moving.
That's correct. A person may not occupy a house trailer while it is being moved. For other types of trailers or semi-trailers being drawn by a truck or truck tractor, the law also says a person may not occupy them while being moved. This is a Class B misdemeanor.
Are there defenses for riding in a regular trailer?
Yes, similar to the open bed rule. Defenses exist if it's in a parade or emergency, transporting farm workers on specific roads in a hayride if the operator didn't know the person was back there, or, and this is a key distinction, if the person occupying the trailer was in a part of the trailer designed by the manufacturer for human habitation.
So that covers things like fifth-wheel RVs or travel trailers that are designed for living in. People can ride in those while being towed.
Based on that defense, yes, if the area they're occupying was designed for human habitation.
Okay, two more quick ones here. School bus operation specifics and undercarriage clearance at crossings.
For school buses, an operator may not operate a school bus if the door used for passengers is open or the number of passengers on the bus is greater than the manufacturer's design capacity for the bus. Operators must also prohibit passengers from standing while the bus is moving or sitting on the floor or anywhere not designed as a seat. And for clearance, an operator may not drive on or cross a railroad-grade crossing unless the vehicle, including any load, has sufficient undercarriage clearance to prevent getting stuck on the tracks.
And that recent law about collisions involving pedestrians or other vulnerable users in crosswalks.
Yes, added in 2021. It creates a specific offense if an operator, with criminal negligence, operates a motor vehicle within a crosswalk and causes bodily injury to a pedestrian or another vulnerable road user, like a bicyclist, someone on an electric scooter or mobility device, or in a golf cart. It's a Class A misdemeanor, escalating to a state jail felony if serious bodily injury occurs. However, it provides an affirmative defense if the vulnerable road user was violating a relevant traffic law themselves at the time of the collision.
Now let's talk about wireless communication devices, basically, cell phones and texting while driving. This area of law has seen significant changes recently, and it's something almost every driver needs to be crystal clear on.
It certainly has, and the rules vary based on age and situation. Let's start with drivers under 18.
What are the rules for them?
Generally, a person under 18 may not operate a motor vehicle while using a wireless communication device, except in case of emergency. This ban includes texting, talking, everything, unless it's an emergency. It excludes FCC licensed two-way radio devices.
Any other restrictions for teen drivers?
Yes, they also have a curfew. They generally may not operate a motor vehicle between midnight and 5 a.m. unless it's necessary for employment, a school-sanctioned activity, or a medical emergency. Moped operators under 18 are exempt from the curfew if they're in sight of their parent guardian. And there's a passenger limit. They generally cannot operate a vehicle with more than one passenger under 21 years old who's on a family member.
Can police pull over a teen just to check if they're using their phone or violating these rules?
No. The law specifically states that a peace officer, quote, may not stop a vehicle or detain the operator for the full purpose of determining whether the operator has violated this section. There must be another primary reason for the traffic stop, like speeding, running a stop sign, etc.
Okay, so restrictions on device use, curfew, and passengers for under 18 drivers. What about using phones in school crossing zones or for bus drivers?
In a school crossing zone, during the times when the reduced speed limit applies, all drivers, regardless of age, may not use a wireless communication device while operating a vehicle, unless the vehicle is stopped or they're using a hands-free device. Signs must be posted to indicate this restriction is in effect.
So, put the phone down completely in active school zones unless you're stopped or hands-free. What about bus drivers?
Operators of school buses or passenger buses carrying a minor passenger may not use a wireless communication device while operating the bus unless the bus is stopped. Exceptions exist for making emergency calls, or if the bus driver is using the device for their work duties, like communicating with dispatch via a two-way radio function.
Now for the big one, the statewide ban on electronic messaging while driving, the texting while driving law. What are the exact specifics of that? This is the one that affects all drivers and has generated a lot of discussion.
Right. This law applies to all drivers. It states you may not use a portable wireless communication device to read, write, or send an electronic message while operating a motor vehicle unless the vehicle is stopped.
Read, write, or send an electronic message while moving. That's the core prohibition.
Correct. To be prosecuted, The violation must generally be committed in the presence or view of a peace officer or be established by other evidence. This raises an important question. This isn't a total ban on touching your phone, is it? It's specifically about electronic messaging.
So it's not illegal under the state law to use your phone for GPS navigation while driving, or to, say, tap the screen to change a song.
Exactly. The law provides several very specific affirmative defenses, which are crucial for drivers to understand. It's a defense to prosecution if your use of the device was, in conjunction with a hands-free device, to navigate using GPS or navigation software, to report illegal activity or summon emergency help, to read emergency messages like weather alerts or traffic warnings using music playback functions, or if the device was affixed to the vehicle, like in a dash mount, and used to communicate for occupational duties, like a dispatcher or rideshare driver using a digital network app.
That's a lot of important exceptions. So the focus is truly on preventing the cognitive distraction of reading, writing, or sending texts or emails while the car is moving. But other phone uses might be okay, especially if hands-free or mounted.
That's the intent, yes. It targets the specific act of electronic messaging.
What are the consequences if you violate this texting while driving ban?
A first offense is a misdemeanor punishable by a fine between $25 and $99. A subsequent conviction bumps the fine range to $100 to $200. However, the penalty becomes much more severe if the violation leads to harm. It becomes a Class A misdemeanor, punishable by a fine up to $4,000 and put up to 1 year in jail if the use of the device causes the death or serious bodily injury of another person.
Wow, potential jail time if texting causes a serious accident. Can police take your phone just for this violation?
No. The law explicitly states that a peace officer who stops a driver for this violation cannot take possession of or inspect the wireless communication device unless authorized by other law, like getting a warrant.
And the state law overrides local city ordinances.
Generally, yes. This state law preempts most local ordinances related to using portable wireless devices while driving, aiming for statewide consistency. However, local authorities can still regulate wireless device use in school crossing zones.
And finally, there's a specific rule just for using devices on school property itself.
Yes, similar to the school crossing zone rule. Generally, you may not use a wireless communication device while operating a motor vehicle on public school property during the hours when the school has designated reduced speed limits are in effect, unless your vehicle is stopped or you are using a hands-free device.
To wrap up our deep dive into Chapter 545, let's look to the future of driving, which in many ways is already starting to arrive. Automated motor vehicles or self-driving cars. The Texas legislature has put specific laws in place for these, and they really challenge our traditional understanding of who or what is driving.
They absolutely do. It's a fascinating area of the law. The first step is understanding the key definitions the state uses. An automated driving system, ADS, is defined as the hardware and software that, when installed and engaged on a vehicle, are collectively capable of performing all aspects of the entire dynamic driving task on a sustained basis, without any expectation that a human operator will intervene.
All aspects of the entire dynamic driving task. What does that include?
It includes monitoring the driving environment and handling all operational tasks like steering, braking, accelerating, as well as tactical tasks like responding to events, changing lanes, turning, signaling. It also has to be capable of performing fallback maneuvers if the system encounters a problem it can't handle. An automated motor vehicle is simply a vehicle equipped with one of these automated driving systems.
Okay, let's unpack this entire dynamic driving task a bit more. These definitions seem really important because they draw clear lines between what the car does itself and what a human might still be responsible for, even in a highly automated car.
They're crucial lines. The entire dynamic driving task covers both those operational aspects, steering, speed control monitoring, and the tactical aspects, object detection and response, lane keeping, turning decisions. What it explicitly doesn't include are the strategic aspects, things like determining destinations or waypoints. Programming the navigation is still usually separate from the dynamic driving task itself.
And how does the law define a human operator in this context?
A human operator is defined as a natural person inside an automated motor vehicle who controls the entire dynamic driving task.
So if the automated system, the ADS, is engaged in doing the driving, who does the law consider the operator for legal purposes, like obeying traffic laws? This is the big shift, isn't it? It challenges everything we've known about driver responsibility.
This is truly where it gets really interesting and fundamentally different. When an automated driving system, ADS, is engaged on a vehicle, the owner of the automated driving system is considered the operator of the vehicle. but only for the purpose of assessing compliance with traffic laws.
The owner of the system is the operator, even if they aren't in the car.
Yes, the law says this applies regardless of whether the person is physically present in the vehicle. And, even more profoundly, the law states that the automated driving system itself is considered to be licensed to operate the vehicle.
So the system is the driver for legal purposes, and you don't even need a licensed human in the car if the system is engaged. That's a huge conceptual leap. What are the implications for liability, enforcement, how police interact with these cars?
It's transformative. It has massive implications for liability in accidents. Is the system owner liable, manufacturer,
Yeah.
for how law enforcement issues citations, who gets the ticket, and just our basic understanding of driving. The law makes it explicit. Notwithstanding any other law, a licensed human operator is not required to operate a motor vehicle if an automated driving system installed on the vehicle is engaged.
So a car can legally drive itself down a Texas highway with no human behind the wheel under this law.
Yes. Provided the system meets the requirements, it really sets the stage for a completely new era of transportation and personal mobility.
That's incredible. So are there specific requirements these automated vehicles must meet to operate legally in Texas? It can't just be any experimental self-driving car, right?
No, absolutely not. An automated motor vehicle can operate in Texas with the ADS engaged, with or without a human physically present, but only if the vehicle meets several conditions.
What are they?
First, it must be capable of complying with all applicable traffic and motor vehicle laws of Texas. Second, it must be equipped with a recording device installed by the manufacturer, essentially a black box, that captures information about whether the ADS was engaged in the event of a crash. Third, the ADS itself must comply with any applicable federal motor vehicle safety standards. Fourth, the vehicle must be properly registered and titled in Texas. And fifth, it must be covered by liability insurance or self-insurance, meeting the state's minimum requirements, just like any other vehicle.
Those seem like critical safeguards: insurance, compliance with laws, recording data. What happens if an automated vehicle is involved in a collision? Who's responsible for the post-accident duties, like stopping and exchanging information?
The law ensures accountability here. It states that in the event of a collision involving an automated motor vehicle, the automated motor vehicle or any human operator of the vehicle shall comply with Chapter 550 of the Transportation Code. That's the chapter covering all the standard duties after an accident: stopping at the scene, rendering aid, providing information, driver's license, insurance, etc.
So if a human is present, even if the system was driving, they still have responsibilities. And if no human is present, the vehicle or system owner is responsible.
That seems to be the implication. The responsibility falls on the legally defined operator, which is the ADS owner when the system is engaged, or any human physically operating the vehicle to fulfill those post-crash duties. The vehicle's data recorder would likely be crucial in determining the circumstances.
And finally, owners can voluntarily identify their vehicles to TxDOT as being automated vehicles or having automated driving systems. I assume that's for data and regulatory purposes.
Yes, it helps the state track the deployment and operation of these vehicles. One other key aspect is exclusive state regulation. The law explicitly states that the operation of automated motor vehicles and their systems is governed exclusively by this specific state subchapter and one section on lighting equipment.
Meaning cities and counties can't make their own separate rules for self-driving cars.
Exactly. It says a political subdivision of the state or a state agency may not impose a franchise or other regulation related to the operation of an automated motor vehicle or automated driving system. What's fascinating here is this preemption. It ensures that autonomous vehicles can operate under one consistent set of rules across the entire state, rather than facing a confusing patchwork of different local regulations. This is seen as crucial for facilitating the development and deployment of this technology. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Wow. We've just taken a really deep dive into Chapter 545 of the Texas Transportation Code. We've uncovered some fascinating details, from the precise legal definition of passing and the exact requirements of the move-over law to the critical nuances of child safety seats and seatbelts, and all the way to these truly cutting-edge regulations for automated vehicles.
It really is eye-opening how detailed and specific these laws are. They cover so many facets of our daily commutes, often in ways we might not expect. Understanding these regulations, even just the key points we've discussed, can genuinely make you a more confident and hopefully a safer driver.
Yeah, it helps you make better, more informed decisions in those unexpected situations, and maybe gives you a better understanding of why certain rules exist, often for very good safety reasons you might not have considered before.
It's really about empowering you, the listener, with practical knowledge directly from the source, the law itself. It turns everyday driving from just getting point A to point B into an opportunity to be a more aware and responsible participant on the road.
So, as you head out on the road, armed with this deeper understanding, here's a final thought for you to ponder. Given how incredibly detailed these traffic laws are, and how rapidly technology like automated vehicles is evolving, what seemingly small traffic rule do you think has the biggest, most overlooked impact on daily road safety? Is it something about signaling, following distance, parking?
And looking forward, as these automated vehicles become more common, how do you think our understanding of operator responsibility will continue to evolve in actual practice, beyond what the law currently states, especially when we start seeing more cars driving themselves with no human inside at all? How will liability, ethics, and enforcement adapt in the real world?
Definitely something to think about the next time you're behind the wheel. Or perhaps just a passenger letting the system take over.